At 1:31 a.m. on January 13, 2021, inside the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, 53-year-old Lisa Montgomery lay strapped to a gurney, her chest rising and falling steadily. This was the only visible movement she could make. The scaly room was filled with silent witnesses and sterile procedures. In a matter of minutes, the United States government would carry out the first federal execution of a woman in nearly 70 years. Before she was executed, she was asked what her final meal would be and what she once recorded as her final words. What she requested for, or didn't, echoed far beyond the execution chamber. But to fully grasp the gravity of Lisa Montgomery's final moments, we must go back to a life scarred by unspeakable abuse, to a segment of where it all began. Lisa's struggles from childhood, through adulthood. The broken girl behind the killer. Born on February 27, 1968, in Melbourne, Kansas, Lisa Montgomery's childhood was not marked by innocence, but by horror. From a young age, she was subjected to relentless sexual and physical abuse, first at the hands of her stepfather, then through a chain of exploitative men. Her mother enabled and concealed the abuse, sometimes even threatening Lisa with a gun when she tried to speak out. Actually, her first sexual abuse was an indirect one, but that couldn't change the fact that it was still brutal as much. Her first occurred indirectly when she was 3 years old. She would lie in bed at night beside her beloved half-sister Diane, close enough to touch, while Diane, then 8, was being raped by their male babysitter. The abuse didn't stop. It became worse over time. According to her revelation, her stepfather would invite his friends round to gang rape her in the room. This is said to last for hours and end with the men urinating on her like she was trash. Her mother got in on the act too, selling Montgomery's body to the plumber and the electrician whenever she needed odd jobs doing. At age 11, Lisa began to dissociate. This was a psychological response to unbearable trauma. She lost herself in fantasies and constructed alternate realities to survive the unimaginable. Diagnosed later with bipolar disorder, PTSD, and complex dissociative disorders, Lisa's mind had been fractured long before she became a household name. Her mental illness was compounded by fetal alcohol syndrome and possible brain damage. She wasn't simply broken. She had been shattered and reassembled into someone barely holding together. Yet the system never truly helped her. Instead, it ignored her, dismissed her, and ultimately condemned her. Montgomery's life wasn't at all like the movies that usually have happy ending. It was the opposite. Her traumatic experience had already given her the death sentence right from the beginning. Continue watching, as what you are going to find out is how she pleaded for help, but the society turned a deaf ear. The crime that shocked America. On December 16, 2004, at the age of 36, Montgomery drove from Kansas to Skidmore, Missouri. She had arranged to meet 23-year-old dog breeder Bobby Joe Stinnett under the pretense of buying a puppy. Bobby Joe was 8 months pregnant with her first child, and they got to know each other online through their shared love of dogs. What happened next was almost too horrific to comprehend. Lisa, once inside Bobby Joe's house, strangled her to death and then, using a kitchen knife, performed a crude cesarean section to extract the baby from her womb. Hours later, Lisa fled with the newborn, later claiming the child as her own. The infant miraculously survived and was returned to her father. Lisa was arrested the next day, with the baby in her arms, pretending she had given birth. The facade crumbled quickly. The brutality of the crime, paired with its bizarre nature, captured national attention. Now, the big question in many people's mind was, why did she commit such heinous act? Continue watching as we expose more on the events that led Montgomery to her final words before death. The arrest and trial. Lisa's arrest was swift. She was arrested the next day after killing Bobby. She confessed to the crime within hours, but her defense team immediately raised concerns about her mental state. Okay, so why did she really commit the act? Montgomery contacted members of her family shortly after killing Bobby Joe and taking the newborn. According to investigative reports and trial evidence, after abducting the baby, Lisa drove back to Kansas and called her husband to meet her at a local parking lot. When they met, she claimed she had just given birth while out shopping and had gone into labor unexpectedly. Her husband reportedly believed her and took her home. That was really surprising. She also called family and friends, announcing the birth of her new baby girl. Some of them even visited and held the child in the hours before she was arrested. This deception was part of the prosecution's case to demonstrate premeditation. Lisa had studied childbirth, faked a pregnancy for months, and had a post-crime cover story ready, complete with announcements to family. However, her defense had argued that Lisa was in the grip of a psychotic break, driven by years of trauma and untreated mental illness. We need to understand what could lead to someone being so profoundly disconnected from their actions that they would be capable of doing something that a normal, healthy person would find unimaginable, said Catherine Porterfield, a child psychologist specializing in treating survivors of torture. Porterfield spent many hours with Montgomery over 18 days as part of an appeals process in 2016. The prosecution painted a different picture: a calculating killer who meticulously planned the murder to steal a child. They pointed to Lisa's online research into cesarean sections, and her prosecution knew about her falsely claiming pregnancies. To them, she was a manipulative liar, not a delusional woman. What then happened next? In 2007, a jury found Lisa Montgomery guilty of kidnapping resulting in death and recommended the death penalty. Well, thanks to, or no thanks to, some incompetent defenders like Fred Duchart, who is known for his misfortunes with clients on death row. The judge agreed, but the case was far from over. Years of appeals and pleas for mercy. Over the next 14 years, Lisa's case wound its way through the appeals system. Her defenders, including mental health experts, human rights advocates, and even some prosecutors, argued that executing her would be a fundamental injustice. They pointed to her history of extreme abuse, her mental illness, and the fact that she had no prior violent offenses. They claimed her original defense team had failed her, neglecting to present critical evidence of her psychiatric conditions and traumatic past. As her execution date approached, pleas for clemency poured in. Organizations like the National Organization for Women, Amnesty International, and dozens of mental health professionals appealed to President Donald Trump to commute her sentence to life imprisonment. Even her half-sister Diane, who luckily escaped to a foster home and into a lovely family, pleaded for a fairer sentencing, not the death sentence. Well, Trump didn't listen. The moment we have been waiting for, her last meal. The final 24 hours. On January 12, 2021, Lisa Montgomery was moved to the Federal Medical Center in Terre Haute, where she spent her last hours in a special cell near the execution chamber, fully shackled. She was under constant surveillance, with round-the-clock staff monitoring her mental state. Her spiritual advisors visited. She reportedly prayed, cried intermittently, and remained mostly quiet. One staff member described her as resigned, not fearful, as if she had accepted that the world would never see the broken child inside the condemned woman. Her last meal was simple: chicken patty with gravy, mashed potatoes, corn, and a piece of apple pie. It was not a lavish request, just comfort food, plain and unremarkable, perhaps like the life she had always longed for but never received. The execution. At 1:15 a.m. on January 13th, Montgomery was led into the execution chamber. Dressed in beige prison garb, she was strapped to the gurney as witnesses watched from behind glass. The room was cold and impersonal, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. In the moments before her death, while the executioners were preparing the lethal injection cocktail, a female prison guard removed Montgomery's face mask and asked her if she had any last words. Lisa paused, took a shallow breath, and replied softly, "No." Those were her final words. A single syllable carrying decades of pain, confusion, and silence. No confession, no apology, no final plea. Just no. At 1:31 a.m., after a short countdown, the lethal injection was administered. Within minutes, Montgomery's chest stopped rising. A federal marshal pronounced her dead. The aftermath. Lisa Montgomery's execution sparked immediate outrage among human rights groups. Many saw it as a miscarriage of justice, not because she wasn't guilty, but because her life and mental illness had not been adequately weighed. Her defenders argued that her execution set a dangerous precedent, that the most traumatized and mentally ill among us could be punished as though they were fully whole and accountable. Others insisted that justice had been served, that Bobby Joe Stinnett's family deserved closure. But what is justice really, when both women, killer and victim, were failed by the systems meant to protect them? The legacy. Lisa Montgomery's case remains one of the most debated executions in modern American history. Her story is not just about a crime, it's about abuse, mental illness, a failed defense, and a justice system that too often values retribution over rehabilitation. She will be remembered not just for what she did, but for what she endured, and for the questions her life and death leave behind. Should mentally ill people be executed? Can a broken mind be held fully responsible? And when society fails a child so completely, who bears the guilt when that child grows up and commits the unthinkable? Her final word, no, wasn't just a refusal to speak. It was a closing argument, a final, tragic punctuation mark at the end of a story we may never fully understand. What do you think about Lisa Montgomery's final day? Was justice served, or was she another victim of a system unwilling to show mercy? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Click here to watch the next video.